Hello, everyone. This is once again Jakob Hillhouse coming back to you with a response to Hayden Cunningham, who argued that the United States should not have left Afghanistan. I would like to prelude that I found his argument well thought out, and many of the points he made were strong. However, I do fundamentally disagree with his position that we should have maintained our occupation of Afghanistan. The terrorist threat has metastasized far beyond the borders of Afghanistan. If we were to invade every single country that may have those who would like to commit terrorism against the United States, we would be at war with the entire world. We spent over $2 trillion on the war in Afghanistan alone, and yet it was not the Taliban who attacked our capital on January 6th, but far-right domestic terrorists who wanted to topple our government. Our greatest threat to democracy is within our own borders. And spending so much money and resources on a war in Afghanistan simply was no longer working and was not benefiting our national security. Cunningham mentions how we have stationed troops in other nations. However, many of the nations he mentions are our allies, so they are there strategically to bolster both our national security and theirs. Washington does keep troops numbering around 150,000 to 200,000 across more than 150 countries. But the 2,500 troops that were in Afghanistan would not be able to turn the tide of a war that we have been losing for 15 years. It would take much greater resources and much more manpower to actually turn the tide. The Taliban already controlled large swaths of the nation years ago. Eventually, this same outcome would have happened whether it be this year or the next, or in another 20 years. So keeping troops in Afghanistan would have proven unnecessary and costly, which has been for the last decade, I would say at least. I agree that the transition could have been handled smoother. We can blame both the Biden and Trump administration for how exactly the departure from Afghanistan was handled. But overall, many sources in the government state that we extracted all but 100 citizens. As I stated before, the so-called war on terror has moved far beyond just Afghanistan, and the threats to the United States are growing every day. Occupation is simply not the best answer to counteracting terrorism. Our presence in Afghanistan only led to more and more violence and more people joining the Taliban. They are able to take over the nation so quickly because they might be seen by many, especially in the rural areas, which were not largely neglected by our foreign policy, as liberators, instead of the reactionary terrorist group that they actually were. We have been in Afghanistan for 20 years, training their forces, and still Afghan national security forces succumb to the Taliban. Keeping our troops in the region would simply be a waste of time and resources. Cunningham seems to be under the impression that we were fighting the war single-handedly, but that is a gross miscalculation of how much Afghan security forces were fighting the war in the last 5 years. I do agree, however, with Cunningham that political vacuums exist, and many groups will attempt to exploit the power vacuum that will be created in Afghanistan by us leaving. But our military is not our only strength. It can accomplish many great things, but to continue a military occupation merely to stop terrorism is a foolhardy task. The threats against the United States today are not like the threats that we were facing in 2001, and I simply do not see how it is premature to end a war that has lasted 20 years, as Cunningham states. The Taliban would have never stopped its war in Afghanistan as long as we remained in the nation. I do not believe that anyone wanted to see Afghanistan fall in this manner, but it was the only outcome to the situation. As I said in my own debate video, my heart breaks for the people of Afghanistan, for the women that will lose so many rights. But I do not believe that our military could have helped this. Eventually, the Taliban would have taken over as proof of how much of the country they had already occupied. occupations have consequences, and even 2,500 troops signal to many that the war must continue, only bringing more strife and violence to the average citizen. Our occupation of Afghanistan led to more kills than terrorism ever has in the United States. To many of the people, we may be seen as the terrorists themselves. The United States commits airstrikes without thinking of the consequences, which can be seen with the 7 dead children just this month. To many, we may very well symbolize the tyranny of imperialism, a relic of a bygone age. Leaving Afghanistan may be a controversial decision, but it was the best choice we had. Fundamentally, our occupation was not working. The problems we are facing today with terrorism are not the same problems we were facing in 2001, and the war in Afghanistan was clearly not in our favor from the very beginning. The Biden and Trump administration made the correct choice in pulling our troops out of Afghanistan, and only time will tell what will happen in the country now. Thank you. I would like to thank Hayden again for posting his video. I do not disagree with him personally, like I said, just his argument. And I would like to thank you all for listening, and I do hope you have a great day.